What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? You want to get your mail out of your top hat for this one because we've got Mike Madrid, the co-founder of the Lincoln Project and political strategist. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Mike.
It's great to be with you guys. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah. So, for the audience, kind of tell who you are, what your background is. Who is Mike Madrid and what does he do?
So, I'm a political consultant. I've been doing this for about 35 years now, realizing how old I am and how many election cycles I've been through. Most of my national work, I think, has been recognized as, one of the co-founders, as you mentioned, of the Lincoln Project, an anti-Trump Republican group that kind of made a lot of waves in the 2020 election cycle when we beat him. Helped get Joe Biden elected. And from there, my real expertise has been working on Latino voters. I wrote a book shortly thereafter, which Simon & Schuster was kind enough to publish, called The Latino Century. And now I'm doing a lot more analytic work, teaching, speaking, writing books, and kind of just talking about what's happened to America during this really, really interesting moment in history.
Absolutely. So, coming in from obviously your history as a political consultant and a lifelong Republican, do you still consider yourself a Republican?
I'm still a registered Republican. I'm the last of the 8 co-founders that's a Republican. I'm kind of the guy who refuses to flip the light switch off as I'm exiting. I mean, the truth is, there's not much left for me in the Republican Party anymore. This is not a group of people I want to work in coalition with. I've never been one of those people that was like, we're going to get the Reagan Bush years back again. I'm just kind of a stubborn son of a bitch who's like, fuck you, you're not going to push me out here. Let's.
Immigrant. I've just been frustrated with American immigration policy for decades. It's been horrible, just in general, across the board. And I thought that I think they fumbled the ball the most on immigration policy in this last election. I think that is arguably that and their unwillingness to really address the issue in Gaza. I think were the two things that did not, that lost them the election. Just people didn't feel the need to come out and vote because they weren't putting anything up there that really made them feel excited about voting.
I just don't know how you overcome the economic headwinds that they were facing. If the economy were doing well, that it would have been a much more competitive race. But their inability to say we didn't get it right or it's been bad because of Trump, whatever the hell it was, But the great irony is Trump is now behaving exactly like they are, just as denial, like affordability is a hoax. It's not really happening. That's essentially what the Biden people were saying, right? I remember having fights on podcasts with people going, "Oh, we're not in a recession. We're not in a recession." It's like the Democrats were literally trying to change the technical definition of a recession when it's like people can't buy eggs. Like that's a real thing. And all these podcasters would just be like condemning working class people. How dare you give up your democracy for the price of eggs? It's like the elitism is a very, very real problem in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
It's so far removed. This professional class is so far removed from the reality of those that are not. And it's not just the condescension, although that it's true. It's the inability to relate. It's like when you're paying 50% of your income on housing, you know what the price of eggs is. You know what the price of gas is. You know what the price of everything is. And so to dismiss that, or to say, well, the S&P 500 is doing great, or we're doing better than the other developed nations. It's like anybody who says that, it's like, shut the hell up. Like,
Yeah.
that is not talking about people who can't feed their kids. Like, enough. Stop it.
Oh, that's absolutely accurate. Obviously, I live in rural Minnesota, and this has been kind of my frustration. Is I understand that the policies, especially if you're comparing Biden and Harris and Trump Vance. Biden-Harris policies, any Democratic policy in the past 40 years has really been better for rural working-class Americans. But nobody's come out and talked to us out here about that. Nobody's explained to them what they're doing to try to make their lives better. And so you've got Republicans that come out and they say, hey, the immigrants are the problem, or the Democrats are the problem, or whatever it is. We see that you've got a problem and we're giving you somebody to blame. And it's like, it's hard for me to not say that, like, I blame them for abandoning the policies and voting against their own self-interest. The farmers have been a little difficult for me the second and third time around with, tariff policies and watching more farms go bankrupt. And, my family was a victim of Reagan's farm policies, which were atrocious, and the dairy industry got decimated here in the upper Midwest, and our family lost their family farm. And that's really what has kept, rural Midwesterners blue, especially like here in dairy country. And so to watch this happen again, and it's like we watched so many people go bankrupt and so many people struggle because of the tariffs the first time around, and then they voted for it the second time around, and then they voted for it the third time around, and the same exact thing is happening, and you want to strangle them. But again, Democrats never came out and messaged to them or talked to them either.
That's because nobody think it'll ever happen to them, and then they also think that they're just temporarily embarrassed millionaires, and there you go. That's how you get farmers who still vote Republican.
Yeah, I've had a theory of the case about the Democratic Party too, which is, and you guys may not like this from the parts that you're from, but I don't think those voters are ever coming back to the Democratic coalition. The problem is, so quit trying. Like, stop. You're not going to win that 270 map. You're not. They've left for whatever reasons.
Go ahead.
We'll come back to it, but here's my bigger issue. California, if you're working class in California, your life is a mess. Okay, it's far worse than where you're at. It's not even close. Okay, poverty is a very real problem in California. It's particularly pronounced with Black and brown people. Housing inaffordability, buying a house, that's a pipe dream. That's not even a thing anymore in California. It's never going to happen. Okay, and again, disproportionately blue collar, non-college educated, Black and brown voters. California has completely failed through its own policies, failed working class people, failed Latino voters, failed Black voters for decades. And now it's gotten so bad that it's not fixable. And like I said, you can blame a lot of things on Republicans. You can't blame California on Republicans, okay?
Oh, believe me, I can.
This is and not credibly, but you will.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, much of it you can. Much of it goes back to Reagan when Reagan was governor, and institutional policies that have not been fixed. Now, Democrats have done a great job at not fixing those either. But we can definitely do that conversation.
Okay. You can't credibly do that. If you're blaming Reagan's governorship after Democrats have a 2/3 supermajority for 3 generations, 30 years, 3 decades, that's on you. That's not a real conversation. That's not intellectually honest. If this was something that could be fixed, the Democrats could fix it by Tuesday, okay? So if you're going to blame Reagan for something that happened in the 60s, creating this problem today, you don't understand the situation. That's just you needing to go back to your talking points to feel comfortable like a little warm blanket.
I'm not saying going back to my talking points. I'm saying there's...
Let me finish now. So there's plenty of failure to go around, okay? The idea that somehow there's better policies coming out of blue state America for working class people is quantifiably false. Okay? Now,
I mean, our state disproves that, I feel. Minnesota. California has huge problems. I'm not going to deny that. California also has a lot of successes, which, I mean,
if you're rich and white and own a home and have a college degree, it's great.
And that's America in general, is it not? I mean,
we have the worst income inequality problem by a wide stretch. You don't hear people. By the way, you don't hear Democrats using that term much anymore. You know why?
Certain Democrats, yeah.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, those that are doing incredibly well. But the problem is, it's most pronounced in blue states. And look, it's not.
There's more wealth in blue states. I mean, I think there's a lot of nuance here.
Yeah, there is more wealth. That's exactly right. When I was growing up, if you said rich, old, and white, you were talking about Republicans. Now you're talking about the furthest left progressive zip codes in America, specifically in California, because they're not interested in working class issues. They care a lot about gun control. They care a lot about marriage equality. They care a lot about the legalization of whatever. They don't give a damn about a blue-collar working class aspirational agenda. They don't. They don't care about education reform. They don't. What they would do is they'll go back and try to blame Ronald Reagan for closing down institutions in the 60s when it was the institutional advocates themselves that demanded the reform. So, look, at a certain point, at a certain point, you have to open your eyes and look and see what the world is actually telling you, get offline a little bit, set down your phones, and realize maybe what I'm reading isn't actually what the truth is. I can actually see these problems and talk to real people and recognize this is failing us. And I'm not making a partisan statement. I'm making it's a pox on both houses, but I'm not going to for a second say that somehow these policies from the left are working for black and brown voters. They're not.
Well,
they're not.
And again, you keep saying policies from the left, but we just agreed that the left is Ronald Reagan today, right? And I think that that's kind of what I was getting at, is we came out of a systematic system of neoliberalism that Democrats very much embraced, especially through the 90s and early 2000s, with Bill Clinton and definitely Obama, even though he ran a very progressive platform. He was a very moderate when it came to his policies on a lot of these issues. And I think that that's really where that shift came from. And that's what I was talking about, is we built these systems back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, slowly moving towards this neoliberalism. And then they have been upheld because, I'm not a big fan of Gavin Newsom as far as his policies go. I don't think that he is a very moderate politician. I would not like to see him as president. I know that's where he's going, but I think, that's where he's gearing up to run towards. So that was my point that I was getting at. I was also just kind of poking fun at the fact that it can go back.
And I guess. When I look at California, and I'm not here as a California apologist, but I can see there's a number of things that could cause an affordability crisis that's particularly unique to California. And I wouldn't say that there's any policy necessarily that's doing this massive change that we're not seeing in any other states. Certainly they have regulations around housing and building houses and zoning. That's an issue for sure. But the biggest unique part of California is the tech sector that is not represented anywhere else in the United States, but represents the largest portion of stock transactions and wealth in this country that is completely unique to California and can certainly account for a large majority of the affordability crisis that exists there today. So there's no leftist policy that's creating this crisis. It's the uniqueness of the California's tech industry and the geography of Los Angeles.
That's completely wrong, and it's entirely wrong. Again, as somebody who's worked in the housing space, worked with local governments, worked in the legislature on tackling these issues for 3 decades, that might be an outside of California understanding, but it is foundationally, quantifiably wrong. The tech sector is a huge part of our industry. It's also not our biggest industry. Ag's bigger than our tech, okay, which is the Central Valley, which is where a lot of our poverty problems are. It's also where the most affordable land is, as affordability goes. The California Environmental Quality Act, which was just finally begun to be amended in Gavin Newsom's 7.5 year of his 8-year term, is a massive, massive, massive impediment to growth, to building. We don't build in California. That's not Mike Madrid saying that. That's even Ezra Klein finally acknowledging in his book Abundance, which is Exhibit A of what is wrong with a lot of these policies. This predated Silicon Valley. This problem has been compounding for decades. This is before there was a San Jose Silicon Valley. Housing has always been an issue. Not always. Since the 80s, it has been an issue. That's when the litigation on CEQA began. Okay? So there are local state tensions which could ease it, but overwhelmingly, these are absolutely leftist policies that are driving the affordability problem. Nobody inside California debates that. Anybody who's familiar with the policy, nobody debates that. It's not debatable. The question is how much. That's fair. But to suggest that this is because of the tech problem, this stuff predated the tech problem.
What would be the leftist policies that they're driving?
The environmentalist policies?
Yeah, CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. That's Democrats now acknowledging. That's Ezra Klein. I don't know if you've read Abundance. It's a damning indictment on why you can't build high-speed rail here. You can't build anything here. That's by design, guys. This is not a mistake. I was asked by the Senate Democratic caucus
But
here.
where else is high speed rail going in the country? I mean, it's not like that's something that's just not happening in California. I mean, it's not happening in any red states. It's not happening in any other blue states either. Like we don't have that type of infrastructure going in anywhere in the state.
Besides LA to Las Vegas now, I guess, but
yeah,
that's not even broken ground
barely.
yet.
I think it's up and running, but in certain parts.
I don't think they probably even want high speed rail in Florida, but if they did, they'd get it done a hell of a lot faster than California. I don't think that's a debatable point. I mean, come on, guys.
I mean, why wouldn't they want high speed rail in Florida? High speed rail in Florida would be a boom.
Vaccines. They don't even want vaccines in Florida. Who the hell knows? I don't know. I can't explain.
That's actually a fair point. That's actually fair.
Like, I guess like that's my criticism of that logic is the fact that if it was these policies specifically holding that back, we'd be seeing it happen in other places that don't have those policies. And unfortunately, we're not. And I would love to be seeing those things happen in California and here. I would love to have high-speed rail here in my state. I would love to have high-speed rail connecting every major city in the country. But we just don't.
I don't know the policies of these other red states. Arkansas probably doesn't need high-speed rail. Maybe they do. I don't know. California is enormous. We have needed it for a long time.
Texas is huge.
Yeah, Texas also runs on oil and like it that way, right? I like I said, I don't know and I don't care. What I do know and can argue very, from a very strong position of both experience and evidence. It's not just Mike Madrid saying this. This is the farthest left of the Democratic Party saying this. This is Gavin Newsom saying this. This is Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks from Oakland saying this. This is Scott Wiener, the most liberal and will be the most liberal member of the United States Congress who's running for Nancy Pelosi's seat, saying this. He co-authored the bill. Nobody's disagreeing it. This is not right-wing claptrap.
Sure, and I'm not saying the policies is I know very little about that specific policy.
This is the Democratic Party's reckoning. This is a reckoning. Which is their policies are hurting working class people. They're not benign. They're hurting particularly black and brown working class people. That is not debatable across the spectrum.
Yeah, but wouldn't you just say that those are just an extension of neoliberalism and as far as democratic economic policies over the last 20 years? So what are you talking about? Leftist policies?
Are you asking me that, or it was framed as a leftist coming from your co-host? Are you talking about asking me?
Well, I guess you're saying it's like leftist policy, but there's no real other than some environmental policies in California. Probably there's no
that's 90% of it. That's 90% of it. That's not coming from the right.
Okay, well, sure, it's not coming from the right, but it's not coming. It's coming from the centrist Democratic Party. Centrist Democratic Party.
The centrist Democratic Party is not fighting for environmental policies, brother.
Sure they are. They're trying to get the hippies of the 60s and 70s environmentalists on their party. So they're fighting for some very minor environmentalist policies.
I mean the fact that you just said that Gavin Newsom is the left of the Democratic Party, and that's
I did not say that. I did not say that. I said
sorry. I apologize. Yeah. I interpret it that way because you said, this is coming from people on the left.
My point is it's everybody. It's from the very far left to the very centrist of the Democratic Party. This isn't Republicans. Nobody listens to Republicans in California. It's a super minority.
No, and that's very fair. And I think that does end up being a problem with a very monolithic government structure in a state. I think when you have nothing that you need to reconcile with unless you're doing it through primaries, you are going to run into issues like that. And I do think that is a big part of the problem with California's political structure. You won't find objection from me on that. But I do think I love my home state, and I think that we are kind of the model of what U.S. policies can be. Obviously, we've done a lot of this with very tight margins, 50-50 House, and that does force people to work together. But, we have a lot of, I would say, more progressive policies, hey, we think the kids should be fed in schools, and that increases economic equality, right? Making sure that everybody has a meal that takes the burden off of black and brown and poor working families to feed their kids once or twice a day. That's huge. that makes sure that kids have enough food where they can get a better education and they can actually learn and go on and be hopefully more economically successful as they get older. Things like that, which were, hard fought wins. And I think that, I would consider that a very pro working class leftist policy. We're working on childcare for all. I think that that's a very pro working class leftist policy. We're working on free college tuition, community college tuition, for residents. Those sorts of things I think are very pro working class leftist policies.
So we've had those. So we've had those for 50 years. Those policies. I support them.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, once you educate people, once you feed people, you also have to create an economy that sustains that. That's the failing. No, I don't think I don't want to say anything. I think there's broad consensus on what you guys are trying to accomplish in your state. We've been doing it for 50 years here. Community college is basically free. It's like $3 a unit or whatever it is right now. It's essentially free. We have had, meal programs for decades, since the 60s in California. Okay. I'm not criticizing those. You don't even find Republicans criticizing those much. Obviously, a few.
Oh, you definitely do. Like I said, because we just passed it here, and they came out hard against it.
Let me make my point.
Sorry. Go ahead.
When I'm talking about California Republicans.
Yeah.
Because like I say, you explained your state, I'm explaining mine.
Mm-hmm.
What you're trying to do now, we have been doing for decades. The problem is our budget, because we have so balanced the budget off of very, very wealthy people in California that there is very little economic mobility in this state. As long as the stock market is doing well, we can finance those programs because we can tax billionaires. We are going to have, starting next month in a few days, an $18 billion structural deficit because it is so over-reliant on the wealthy, these people in Silicon Valley that we tax, to pay for the social safety net at the bottom. So over 50%, listen to this, over 50% of Latino children, the biggest demographic in the state, are on Medi-Cal assistance. That's a poverty metric. Over 50, not 15, 50%, okay? And we have got the worst economic mobility in the country. So yes, we will provide prenatal care, even to the undocumented, by the way. We will provide meals to any student who wants and or needs them. We will provide free community college, free access to higher education system. We've been doing it for decades. But what we won't provide is economic opportunity to actually work to be able to build yourself up and join the middle class in California. That's a sin. That's a problem, and that's a function of policy decisions. It's not a coincidence. It's man-made. It's created. It's what we built, and it's not sustainable. That's what you're gonna hear a lot of news clippings coming out in the next couple of weeks about California's structural deficit. That's how this problem was created. Is you can pay for all of these things, but if you're providing that based off of peeling off the wealth of a shrinking number of people who are just leaving the state because of those tax burdens, how do you finance it? If you're not going to create a tax base of middle class homeowners and workers, you can't buy a house in California.
Well, and I think therein lies part of the problem is California has been a desirable place to live for an incredibly long time. It's where the rich and famous have lived forever, since it's existed, basically. And that creates affordability issues when you get a lot of wealthy people consolidating in a certain place. That is just the nature of the way the economy works,
we have more
right?
poor people than anybody, too. We've always had both.
Well, yeah, and as soon as you start getting more wealthy people, you're going to have... I mean, the wealth disparity in Florida is incredibly high. The wealth disparity in Texas is incredibly high. The wealth disparity in New York is incredibly high.
They're not comparable, though.
Again...
Yeah. Look. What we've started to do is we've started to remove housing from the affordability index because this is the only way to kind of look at what could possibly be fixed, because once you add housing, and of course you have to add housing, it's the largest expense.
Well, and that's what I mean. I think that housing is the thing that drives the affordability disparity more than anything else. I think that is absolutely, and this is a nationwide crisis, obviously, that we need to be addressing. And we've talked about this quite a bit, because it's a very multifaceted issue addressing housing, and we've kind of kicked the can down the road on this, and that's why we are dealing with the problems that have been building for, half century or long, probably, honestly, really since the 50s, when we started with this model of the suburb and what has really kind of led us to where we are now. And California is definitely guilty of that, and rich white people are very guilty of this, because it's like we want everybody to do well. We just want them to do well over there, because I don't want to give up my fancy suburban house and my cushy lifestyle and all of that. We don't want those people moving into our neighborhoods, and that is absolutely the case, and that is absolutely something that is on very high display in California, I think, of all places. So
I think it's on display more, though. But I mean, if looking at some of the numbers, just doing some really cursory Google searches, the Deep South has by far the worst upward mobility and economic mobility of the entire country. And the country itself has had basically stagnant upward mobility as compared to the rest of the country since the 70s. So, certainly California is not great, but they're not the worst. And the United States as a whole has been pretty mid as it stands. So, I don't know.
If that includes housing costs, then that data is not accurate as of the last 7 years. But even if it is, we should not be competing with Mississippi and California. That's the bigger problem. The fact that that's what we're looking at is who's worse, Mississippi or California, should be an embarrassment, because it is.
It counts like Georgia and South Carolina, Alabama too. Okay. Sure. So I mean, not everything could be compared to Mississippi.
Right. Well, and again, I think that this is where California too. It gets really hard to compare California just because they are such a gigantic state with so many different industries. I mean, they have a huge agricultural industry. They also have a huge tech industry, and what else? Where else do you compare that to? I mean, I'd say Texas was probably their biggest
economic comparison numbers wise.
Numbers
wise only though.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. California's got a lot of issues, and definitely a lot of issues that need to be addressed and fixed. And you won't find any. I mean, I can't. That's not something that can be denied. I just think that getting stuck on California is also difficult to then try to apply that nationwide as far as what policies are being effective or ineffective, because again, it's such a different place. Obviously, people aren't moving in droves to Minnesota because it doesn't have beautiful beaches and it's not 70 degrees year round, which makes a huge difference. And it's not where all the rich and famous people are going to move. Our housing, even though we still have a housing issue, is not nearly as affected by that consolidation of wealthy people trying to buy up all of this property. So our problems are going to be different here than they are, obviously, on the coast out in California. I didn't really get to much of the Lincoln Project here today. I would still love to talk more about that. I kind of want to leave, because of your expertise on the Lincoln Project and the work that you did there. I think you guys were really instrumental in the 2020 election and kind of coming in to move the needle with the moderate voters that are left in the country and the people who just have some rationale left in their skull. Can have conversations like this where there's disagreements over what policy is the best, but it's talks about policy and not just this wild cultural politics, identity politics. How do we start messaging to those people more effectively again? How do we start reaching those people and put the parties aside, because the parties are going to do their own thing, but as independent groups that we're working with, what have you found has been the best and the most effective to make those happen, to move that needle?
Well, there's a couple of, in 2020, the group that was moving kind of the most that we needed to win were these moderate Republicans. The question was, and that was my job as the data guy, is what messages can we use to get sort of the Adam Kinzingers, the Mike Madrids, the Rick Wilsons, to kind of say enough And we could see very early on that there was just a nominal amount. There was enough. We needed to move them about 5-6%. And if we were able to do that, we would win Pennsylvania, we would win Arizona, we would win Georgia. North Carolina would look better than it ultimately played out as, but we would win the 270 map. But something was happening at the same time. I was very public about this in 2020, and that is the Democratic Party started to really hemorrhage Latino voters. And everyone looks at 2024 as when it happened. It's been happening for a decade, and that's my area of expertise. And I started to publicly raise the alarm bells. And the Biden, folks were saying we don't have a problem. It's not a real problem. It's methodology. It's fake news, and they were wrong. One of the reasons why the 2020 election was as close as it was, remember, most of the polling averages had Biden winning by 3 points. He barely squeaks it out by 43,000 votes across 2 or 3 states. The reason why is because most pollsters didn't have a weighted average significant enough to actually gauge Latino public opinion, which is what I was saying, and that the race was closer than it looked, and it was for the exact same reason I said. Okay? A lot of pollsters still to this day will throw in non-whites and like add black and brown voters together as if somehow it's a voting block. Nonsense, but it's one of the biggest blind spots in American politics. I'm getting somewhere with all of this. The problem is, for Democrats, as I see it, is that the biggest swing vote now is not those moderate Republicans anymore. They've already made their decision. The biggest problem is Latino working class voters, which is why I wrote the book that I wrote. Came out last June before both conventions were held, as a warning to Democrats that the Democratic Party still believes it's a working class party. The working class has been leaving the Democrats for a very long time. And as somebody who was a young Republican from a working class family in the 80s and the 90s, when I would hear Republicans saying, well, they're voting against their interests. These people don't understand what they're doing. They're being fooled by the powers that be. I used to hear that from Republicans all the time in the 80s and 90s. Now I hear it from white progressives. It's like everything has just switched. They don't know what they're doing. They're not smart enough to know what their interest is. They vote against their interest. They're being suckered by all this. They're just too dumb. It's basically what they're saying is they're too dumb. And that's the same arguments that I heard amongst Republicans. I hear amongst progressives. The problem is they're not too dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. These are rational people that are voting with blue-collar values, and I respect those values. I grew up with them. The problem is the Democratic Party is not a blue-collar working-class party anymore. And what we're seeing is the blue-collar worker is becoming more reactionary for very good reasons. Things are getting worse. Well, let me qualify that. The Latino working class is becoming more reactionary. Black and white, non-college educated, which is what we use to say working class if you don't have a college degree. It's a very crass characterization and not entirely accurate, but it's the one that we use. If you look at the elections that happened in New Jersey, Virginia, most of those voters, black and white, had a variation of between 2 and 3% going from 2024 to 2025. The massive shift is Latino voters that were like 12 and 15 point swings. So what's going on? What's going on is Latinos are far less racially polarized than black or white voters, and they're far less partisan than any group. In fact, my argument, my thesis right now is that the Latinos are the only swing group right now that is behaving the way a healthy voting bloc does in a normal democracy. They are punishing whoever it is in power, regardless of party, by saying this is not working. Black non-college voters are going to vote for Democrats 85% plus of the time. Doesn't matter how bad things get, and white rural Americans are pretty almost the same. Okay? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Trump, he is their tribal chieftain the same way Biden was for Black America. Doesn't matter. They're not going to move. Latinos are going to move. And that to me is the saving grace of the democracy at this point. The problem becomes, how do Democrats start appealing to this voting group? Because it's no longer the Mike Madrids, the Bulwark people, the Lincoln Project people. Those people have decided, and they were very small anyway. The real swing group on what happens with Nevada, Arizona, even Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, key House seats in California are Latino working class voters that you can actually move. There's this weird obsession that has existed since the late 80s about the Rust Belt and the blue wall. I think that's a really bad way of looking at the 270 map. I think it's completely wrong. The only way because those voters aren't coming back. The only way to get those voters in a permanent way, you may get a one-off like the 2026 race, but you'll probably see low voter turnout before you see a vote swing, is if you look at North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Nevada. It's the Sun Belt is where the future of the Democratic Party is. It's not the Rust Belt. And so the blue wall everybody talks about, I think that's been a misread of the 270 map since the 2020 election cycle. I think that Democrats, if they're going to get back into being competitive, those states are also growing in electoral numbers. We don't talk enough about this, but the 270 map will look different as a lot of blue states lose electoral votes and start growing in redder states. The only way that there can be a competitive Democratic Party after that transition happens is if there's a massive reconnection with Latino voters in a way that is not going to happen with white rural voters, and that's a declining share of the population anyway. So probably a very different answer than you were looking for, but again, I'm a data-driven
I wasn't looking for a specific answer. I'm looking for an effective, honest answer, and I think that is what you're providing. Obviously, a different perspective. You're a Latino who is focused on Latino politics, and that's something that I have very little experience with, obviously living in a very mayonnaise-colored state. So I really do appreciate the perspective there, because my perspective has been from rural white working-class voters for most of my life, and focusing on how to kind of recapture some of that. My district, I think, is flippable, especially with the current workings, but it's a very white working class district. And I think that it's going to take a little bit of everything. But I do agree that focusing, I don't know that the Rust Belt is completely lost. I think that Wisconsin and Michigan will remain competitive well into the future. Minnesota has been, a Democratic stronghold longer than any state in history. I do think that Texas is going to do some interesting things coming up, and I'd love to get your perspective on what you think Texas is going to look like in the coming elections, and what you think. I really, every year I get so hopeful that we're going to see some big changes in Texas where they can start to kind of...
Yeah. So that's a great question. And again, the thing about a changing map is it doesn't happen in one election cycle. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I was investing with the Lincoln Project so hard in Arizona and Georgia, and we were the first ones saying that, and people were like, these guys are nuts, but we were spending millions in both of those states, is because after you see a state moving 3 election cycles in a row, if it's purple like Georgia was, like Arizona was, there's a very good chance with a high turnout ratio you can pop it into contention, which is what we did. The one outlier there is North Carolina, which is kind of my white whale. North Carolina should be a blue state. The problem with North Carolina is white college-educated voters vote a lot like white non-college-educated voters there. There's a stickiness there. And as it becomes more of a Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, biotech, finance hub, the hope is that will change. It should have by now on paper, but it's not quite there the way Georgia is. Georgia, by the way, my estimation is it's a much bluer state than people give it credit for. Mm-hmm. That's going to obviously, to me, the future of the party, the Democratic Party, looks more like John Ossoff, Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego, James Tallarico in Texas than it does Amy Klobuchar, Mike Waltz, whatever his name was, Paul Ryan. Like, that's really DC mentality. That doesn't mean you leave those states. It means that the battlefield expands, and you have to be competitive in those states. But the future of the party, where it's going demographically, argues very strongly for a Sunbelt strategy. That's my theory of the case.
So North Carolina is interesting because they have a Democratic governor, mm-hmm. And a number of state-level high-ranking Democrats, but then swing Republican in the past few elections. And what's your take on that? Because I mean, these are all statewide elections where, and many of them were voted on side by side, and it's kind of wild to like,
In
huh?
2026?
Yeah, well, in 2024, 2026, yeah.
Well, I mean, 2024, I think a lot of this we're going to look back at 2024 and just say it came down to what we were talking about earlier, which was the economy was bad and the borders were out of control. Like it wasn't deeper, it wasn't more significant a shift than that. This argument, and I went back and forth with Patrick Coffini and a bunch of Republican pollsters talking about a new MAGA realignment and the party of the people, this racial realignment that was happening. That was never. My opinion was, and I was very public about this. That's a complete misunderstanding of what's going on. There is no racial realignment. There is a racial de-alignment. And a de-alignment means that these voters, especially Latinos, are leaving the Democratic Party at a rate faster than any other group. But that doesn't mean they're becoming more Republican. There's no evidence showing that they're becoming more conservative, more Republican, more evangelical, like none of that. That's all just nonsense. What's happening is they're leaving the Democratic Party. They've had it with the Democratic Party, and they're more in play. So in a decent Republican year, you're going to see a greater swing towards Republicans. And in a bad year for Republicans like this, you're going to see a greater swing towards Democrats, like you saw in New Jersey and Virginia and Miami and Tennessee special and California. And all of these voters are swinging back. It doesn't mean that they're now, oh, we woke up and realized how bad the Republicans were. They know what they're doing. Voters are not dumb. They don't believe either party. I mean, there's 30 years, like we were talking about earlier,
Right.
of evidence saying that these policies from the Democratic Party don't work for us. Yes, the Republicans are worse, but we knew what we were getting under Biden-Harris. And if your selling point is you're going to keep getting this, so don't vote for that guy, Latinos, I'm proud of it, said, go to hell. Like, learn your lesson, Democrats. You're going to have to actually help people out. Otherwise, what are we doing here? And that's why I think Mamdani did as well as he did, incidentally. I think that's why Bernie Sanders is as resonant, is because they're populist.
Economic populism. Populism.
Well, let's be careful with that, because people have this real misunderstanding of what populism is.
Mm-hmm.
They believe there's a left populism and a right populism. Like, that is not a thing. Populism, by definition, is not right or left. It's anti-institutional. It's anti-establishment. It's countercultural. And so, like, when people say, well, the Democratic Party needs to embrace, left populism, or I don't even know what it doesn't even mean anything. It's like, it's a misunderstanding. But like, to our previous conversation, the Democratic Socialists are at least talking about an economic policy. You can debate whether or not it's good or bad or how it's going to be. To me, the more interesting thing is they're the only ones talking about it, which is why they're connecting, which is why it's working, by the way. And the disaffiliation of Latinos broadly, it's a hemorrhaging. It's manifesting itself like if in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas as MAGA, because that's all that's there. If you go to New York City or Los Angeles, there's no MAGA there. They're DSA. So they're voting DSA. It's the same demographic saying the same things. Yeah. So whichever party...
Do you think had it been a Trump-Bernie matchup in 2016, based on this conversation, that Bernie would have won?
I do.
Yeah.
A lot of people say you're full of shit. I
believe it. I mean, I think it would have, because it was, again, I think that a lot of people were looking for that economic populist message that we're not aligning with a party. They were aligning with a feeling, with a connection to, these are the problems that I have in my life that neither party is addressing. And
yeah, and to me, that's really more what it is than the specific policies. Is what they're saying is the system is rigged, because it is. Because it is. And it's not just the corporate overlords. That's part of it. It's also the professional class. It's fucking rigged. It is. It is. Yeah, it's absolutely. The environmental lawyer in Marin who's not going to allow the housing project to go through is as big a fucking problem in California as, these massive companies buying these houses. It's quantified. It's not right or left, man. It's haves and have-nots. It's insiders versus outsiders. So populism, we are in a populist moment that is resonant broadly amongst the classes, top down. So a lot of people say there's this horseshoe theory. I don't buy any of that.
Horseshoe theory is bullshit.
I don't buy any of that. What it is the middle and lower classes revolting. They're saying this shit doesn't work. And the problem is, I think for black and white Americans, is they're so calcified in their power structures, they're so racially polarized that it doesn't matter how bad it gets economically. They're like, I'm not voting for that racist Trump. And, you know, MAGA people in rural America are like, I'm not voting for that Obama guy. I'm not going to do it. Like, right? I mean, not everybody on either side, but enough to calcify both sides. And that's why I'm saying the only group that is moving and acting rationally in a system where things are this fucked up seems to be at the moment Latino voters who are rejecting whichever party has made promises and is falling short. And to me, that's a very hopeful sign. That's the thesis of my book, The Latino Century, is the great hope for this American experiment to polarize and to deracialize is literally the demographic transformation that we're experiencing right now. So would Bernie have won? I don't know, but what I will tell you is running, and Hillary Clinton was an establishment candidate. People will say, well, she's a woman, she couldn't be. I was like, Clintons are the establishment, man.
Yeah.
Like, come on, stop.
And that is something that I think, and obviously being a straight white guy, I've always got to be careful with how I phrase this, but I don't think that Hillary or Kamala lost specifically because they were women. I mean, I don't think anymore that, saying that America isn't ready to elect a woman was like saying that America wasn't ready to elect a black man. We did that, but Obama was an objectively good candidate, just as a candidate, you know?
Yeah.
And Hillary was not. Hillary was not. And I don't think that, I mean, just looking at Kamala's primary performances, like, I don't feel that she was a great candidate either. I think that she also had a great disservice to her with Biden sticking it out into the point of the election where he did. I think that there was a lot more working against her than it was with Hillary. I think that the blame lies solely on Hillary for that election loss. In that one, where I don't put as heavy of a criticism on Kamala, but I do think that a charismatic female candidate who had the type of presence that Obama did, and spoke to the economic issues like Obama did, would have the same type of success that Obama did. And so that's where, I think obviously both were very much establishment candidates. And I think that had a lot more to do.
I had to do a lot of dispelling of, probably to little or no effect, but there's this, Latinos are all misogynistic, machismo, they're all racist, they don't like black people. And look, Barack Obama got the highest Latino vote share in history as a black man. The second was Hillary Clinton amongst Latinos. Probably the politician in American politics who most benefited by Latino overperformance was Kamala Harris. She ran statewide in California as Attorney General and as a U.S. Senator and dramatically overperformed with the same demographic. Maybe it's not people's need to say, to blame people and find fault, and maybe take some ownership and say, maybe we fucked up. Maybe the economy was bad. Maybe the borders were out of control. Maybe it's as simple as that. It's not like a Latino cultural problem. These same people, by the way, nobody's saying that after the Miami race, when all these Latinos went and showed up for a white Democratic candidate against a Republican Latino male. Like, suddenly it's like, what the misogyny suddenly went away? The racism suddenly went away? Like, people will take the smallest exceptions and try to blow them up and make these racist, lazy ethnic tropes into their reality because it makes them feel better. The data says something very different, and it's not complicated, which is if the economy is not working and you've got a charismatic candidate like a Barack Obama, the capitalist engine was melting after the George W. Bush era. Like, literally, Wall Street was melting. And Obama comes on. There's no way McCain was going to win that race. And he shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. Right? Obama was the right man at the right time, right candidate, and he dramatically overperforms, to your point. So candidate quality does matter, probably not as much as we would hope or like. But the anti-establishment sentiment in the Democratic Party now is as a fever pitch as it was from somebody who saw the Tea Party movement, very anti-Tea Party, in the Republican Party 12, 15 years ago. Like, people are done. They don't believe it anymore. Like the same way Mitt Romney was kind of heckled off stage for saying corporations or people have the rights of people, right? It's like that stuff is gone. Like the people don't, the base doesn't believe that. When you look at the Democratic Party's popularity numbers, it's so low because it's black and brown working class people who were saying enough, dude. Like this shit doesn't work. Go fight. First and foremost, we're going to vote Democratic, but have something to stand for. Give us something to fight for. And that's why I think all the energy is with the DSA right now.
And like Trump taking over the Republican Party, MAGA taking over the Republican Party, his Tea Party, do you think that it's going to be some figure that comes out of sort of obscurity that realigns the Democratic Party into this populist messaging? Or do you feel like it is just everyday progressive voters who are eventually going to gain more and more footholds within the Democratic Party itself and sort of be this more grassroots? Which one do you think is more likely?
That's a great question. Look, I think it can be either, but what I will say is, just from history, the more credible you are in criticizing the system basically requires you not be of the system. Right. So people will be like, oh, Bashir can win these voters in Kentucky. And it's like, that's not what's happening, in my opinion. It's like, that's really missing the moment.
Well, I don't believe. It seems very, very, very hell-bent that Bashir is going to be the next president.
It might be. I mean, I could be wrong. Like I said, it's way too early to prognosticate. But what I'm seeing is, if I believe we are in this really deeply populist moment, and I do, the fact that we elected this kind of celebrity, which is an important word, celebrity status guy with a fake veneer, with no military or political experience for the first time in the country's history, meaning he's purely of no institutional establishment that exists, right? And I'm talking about Trump, of course. That is the selling point. The question is, can you sell the Democratic Party, which is the professional class? Can enough younger, and there's a generational divide in the Democratic Party. If younger people who are saying enough of this, will they support an outsider with no government experience who can with greater credibility argue that dramatic systemic reform needs to happen? I think the answer to that is yes. And the reason is because you're just a more credible messenger. Once you've held office, people can say, well, why didn't you do that when you were? Right? Once you're defending a record, you're defending the institution. You're defending your story as being a part of what people are revolting against. So I think the moment for Democrats is bigger than I've ever seen it. It's as big or bigger than it was when the Republicans had their Tea Party Trump moment. Will it be a different candidate? I mean, the one difference between the Republicans and the Democrats is, Republicans have always been anti-government at their core. It's just so they're not serious about governing. They're not serious about ideas. They're just serious about tearing it down. So anybody who's been a part of it is more suspect. Trump fits the bill. The question is, are enough young working class, non-white people in the Democratic Party pissed off enough to be like, this isn't working. Let's just be honest about it. It's broken. But then that's where, I think a Mamdani comes in, right? I mean, he was obviously an office holder, but the messenger was right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, he was an office holder at a state level. I mean, it wasn't, it's not huge national politics that people have paid attention to, which I think. And that was one of my biggest criticisms of Hillary Clinton as a candidate. Not like Hillary Clinton at the time, arguably until Kamala, was objectively the most qualified on paper person to ever run for president, period. Yeah. Like, that's not up for debate. If you're looking at a resume, most qualified ever. But that comes with a lot of history and a lot of baggage and a lot of, that comes with 30, 40 years of Fox News coming up with dirt and mud and slander to sling at the Clintons, whether it's true or not. That's part of the American psyche, and that's all things that you have to overcome. And I think nobody knowing who the fuck Obama was coming into the presidential race is a huge bonus, right? Like, because they have to come up with all of their oppo from scratch at that point.
Correct.
Rather than just opening up the greatest hits playbook and just running them on repeat. And I think that that's where I don't understand why Democrats especially are just so stuck on hanging on to these fucking fossils that have been in the party in high level politics for centuries. It feels like,
Yeah.
and now they're like, this is just their time. They're 97 years old, but they need to be the next president, and they've got all of this history behind them, and it's like, this is bad. You want somebody that people have. You want enough name recognition where you can obviously get something rolling. You can't get blood from a stone, but somebody who doesn't have those decades of bad publicity behind them, of just a record, because that's the thing is, you said, as soon as you get into elected office, you have to play the cards that are on the table sometimes, and sometimes that's messy. But it's never messy in a political attack ad, right? It's always going to be, this was
Yeah.
straightforward. You had an option. This was the option you chose, and that was a bad thing you did, and that's all that people are going to see at that point.
Yeah, and I think again that goes back to the idea that Democrats are institutionalists at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
They're protecting the
Mm-hmm.
institutions virtuously, by the way. That's a virtue at
Mm-hmm.
this moment because
Yeah.
when the Republicans just want to burn it all down, you do have the Liz Cheneys of the world saying, "Look, I don't agree with Democrats on anything except for we can't be tearing down the government willy-nilly. Like we can't be tearing
Yeah.
down the media and attacking the media. We can't be tearing down institutions and expect anything other than, mayhem, chaos, and a radiating ruin of a society. Like I won't, I will compromise everything I believe in from a policy perspective to preserve the institutions." And that's
Mm.
where I think why the Democrats keep supporting. It's why they go back to an Andrew Cuomo. I mean, my God, Andrew Cuomo, you couldn't find anybody better than that.
Horrible. It was the worst
Yeah,
worst
but the answer,
campaign I've ever seen.
yeah, the answer was they couldn't. And that is part of that defending the indefensible that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree. Um, this has been. I've loved every moment of this. I hope you don't feel like we've gotten too combative or anything. I've just very much
Oh,
enjoyed
I,
actually talking
yeah, I'm,
policy
I'm
for
I'm
once.
a political consultant. This is not combative.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, I very much appreciate the time that you've spent here with us and having these conversations. This has
yeah.
been um, uh, very much a treat for us, I know, and some of the people in the comments have said the same. The last thing before I'm going to let you do plug all your stuff here, but the last thing I wanted, because you're talking about Latino voters, and having spent a good portion of my childhood in Miami, the Latino demographic that has always kind of confuzzled me the most is Cubans. And now to an extent, Venezuelans in South Florida, where they have been much more identity politic based. They have been very conservative based, but Florida used to be a very purple state, and it has trended away from that. Partially because all of the old people who are looking for a warm place to die are moving there. So demographics have changed a little bit, but also the the South Florida Latino community has become arguably more conservative, even though these are the same people who are trying to catch them while their ankles are still wet so they can ship them back, which has always been something that has boggled my mind from an outsider's perspective. But I'm curious on your perspective there. Is that a swingable? Obviously, it swung a little bit here in the most recent election. Is that
Yeah.
something where we could turn Florida back purple again? Do you think that there's a winning strategy to work with South Florida Latinos, Cuban and Venezuelan Latinos there? And
It's a
and
great
why
question.
are they like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Cubans have always been a very distinct subculture of the Latino vote. So let me kind of put it in
Mm-hmm.
perspective because they take a dramatic over representation in the narrative. Cubans are only 6% of the Latinos in the country.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why they play such an outsized role is because they live in the southern part of what has been a key purple state. And so their issues have kind of defined Latino issues, quote unquote Latino issues. And there's two pieces to that. The first is this anti-communist, anti-socialist messaging, which literally does not work with any other group except for perhaps the Venezuelans. Maybe a little bit, kind of didn't. But Venezuelans are like less than a third of 1% of Latinos in the country. So we got to really put this, again, keep it in perspective. By the way, 60% of Latinos are of Mexican American descent.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the Latino vote, it's the Mexican American vote.
Right.
And it's not that 60% is that big. It's that every other group is so small. Nobody else even hits double digits. Puerto Ricans are about 9%. And Americans, of course, by birth. So
Mm-hmm.
I was arguing that the Cuban diaspora is very unique. I think you put it very diplomatically and very astutely. There's no other group in America that we have bent over backwards for more to allow more people in here under all sorts of circumstances than the Cubans, and they are amongst the most anti-immigrant group in the country. It's shocking.
Yeah.
Like wet foot, dry foot policy, like make exceptions because of the Cuba situation and allowing people in here because of the Cold War. Like if you were Cuban and wanted to be here, we would make an exception for you. We'd find a way to make an exception. And then once you got here as a Cuban, suddenly you develop these really anti-immigrant sentiments. So let's set that aside for a second, right? But still, what we're seeing now is even with the ICE raids and the ICE crackdowns, what's overwhelmingly driving voter behavior is the economy. It's the economy. It's even affecting the Cuban American voters. The ICE raids are not helping. They are clearly a part of it. They're but communities being terrorized. This is the first time I've seen Mexican Americans, Cuban Americans in Florida, Dominicans and Puerto Ricans in New Jersey and New York City, all shifting in the same direction. I've never seen that as somebody who's been studying this for 35 years. So there's two ways to look at that. The first is the Democrats have been given a new opening to find themselves and get back to its working class roots. The danger is, and I think this is unfortunately the more likely scenario, just having worked with both parties, they're going to immediately say, oh, see, they were too dumb. They voted for Trump. They're not that smart. Now they figured it out, fucked around and found out. Now they're back to their natural home. And that's the most likely scenario. I think that 2026 is going to look very, very good for the Democrats. It'll be like 2018, which had the highest Latino midterm turnout in history, the most anti-Republican. But as I advise Democrats all the time, after that historic number in 2018, you saw 3 historic rightward shifts to the Republicans with the same groups. The main takeaway is they're not voting for you. They're voting against the Republicans, and they will vote against you if you do not get your shit together exactly like they did in 2024.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that's pretty hard to argue with now at this point, that the Democratic Party, every single time they'll get a win, and then they're just like, see, everything we were fucking up on before wasn't really the problem, and we just need to go back to doing exactly what we were doing before. I mean, it's the definition of insanity with them. And
the only way that I see us breaking that is us getting a majority progressive caucus in the House, and hopefully some more representation in the Senate. Like, unless we elect actual progressives on the left side of the Democratic Party while gaining ground here, I think that's the only way that we actually make a strong push to make the Democratic Party more successful for working class people.
My hope, my optimism coming in through all of these recent special elections is overperformance of grassroots candidates in general, saying that, you know what, whether the Democratic Party throws its weight behind where it should be going or not, candidates are starting to say, go fuck yourself, we'll do this on our own and fix this. And I do think that is the difference that we haven't had before. And as long as we can keep up that momentum and keep getting grassroots candidates elected who don't need big corporate donors, don't need a ton of party support, and we'll say, hey, we'll do this through social media, we'll do this through small grassroots organizing groups, with or without the party, that would be the saving grace. And I'm just hoping that it's enough for 2028. But your thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, that's where the energy's at. And again, everything you just described is a sign of populism, right? We don't need the traditional financing. We don't need the traditional party structures. All we need is enough people of common cause who are pissed off. Like I said, I think that the real reckoning for the Democratic Party is going to come after the midterms, because you're going to see Democrats win broadly, very far left, very centrist. Whoever's the nominees are all going to win. Expect and hope for, this is going to sound very counterintuitive, the Democrats really, really, really need to have a bruising, bloody, rough primary, because what we've been watching for the past 2 years is a bunch of hand-wringing from the party going, who are we? What do we do? You know, we're kind of afraid of Trump, and, Schumer and Hakeem doing what I don't know what the hell they've been doing, but it's like there hasn't
We
been
don't
this
either.
like there hasn't been this nasty, ugly. I don't mean personal, but I mean policy fight. You need to have a fight because that's how you forge who you are. And historically, candidates that come out of nasty, hard fought, bruised primaries, they're tested. They're ready to go. Like the public knows who they are. The public's watched it. They've won. They've got a narrative and they can march down the field and take on the Republican. That's what you want. So don't be afraid of that when that happens. Lean into that. Go back your candidates. Go fight with passion. Keep it on policy. Don't make it personal. But that's how you develop a stronger candidate. That's how you develop the direction of the party is through conflict. You
Yeah.
forge tougher steel through conflict, not through waffling and clearing out primary fields. You don't want that. You want to fight.
No, I agree. The only thing that ever makes me nervous about that is where the primaries get dirty to the point where you start peeling people off that'll never vote for the winner of that primary. And I don't think that that's really based in reality. I mean, a lot of people said it about, like the Bernie voters not voting for Hillary Clinton, but that was bullshit. They voted for a higher rate for Hillary Clinton than, Hillary voters voted for Obama when she lost her primary to him. But it's always that like fear of you're going to come out and you're going to get a bunch of these attack ads and this mudslinging that's going to carry over into the general election and detract from your chances of winning there. But I don't know that there's a good alternative to that anyway. So. Well, I really appreciate your time again. This has been an incredibly great conversation, and I want you've got a lot. You just wrote a book. You've got a few books out, correct now, and you are trying to get more into writing, more coming. Please let us know. Shameless self promotion. Everything you want the audience to know, everything you want to plug. Go for it.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So the book I came out with last year was called The Latino Century: How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. Touches on a lot of things that we just talked about today, kind of what both parties are doing right, what both parties are doing wrong. Whoever controls that demographic, I think, will dominate American politics for a generation. I write on Substack on all of these things that we've been going back and forth on. The newsletter is called The Great Transformation. It's free. I don't have anything behind a paid wall. But all these topics about collapsing institutions, emerging coalitions in the parties, and what a populist America means at this moment in time. So you can find me on socials. If you've enjoyed the conversation, I do respond to kind of everybody. If you've got further follow-up conversations, send me a note. Substack is kind of where I live, and I'll get back to you and hopefully have a further conversation. But I've appreciated the time, guys. It's been awesome. It's been real. Glad Robert connected us, and love to come back if you guys want to have me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I may, if you guys will have me, try to crash one of your guys' lives one of these
Yeah,
days too. Here,
for
I'd love
sure.
that.
For sure.
As always, everybody, thank you for giving us a platform and the ability to have these incredible conversations and get incredible guests like this. We only get to do that because you guys listen to us banter on. So we appreciate the hell out of that. Obviously, if you want to support the channel, offjoewagon.com has merch for that. You can become a member on YouTube and get a few fun extras there, and it just helps us keep the lights on and continue doing this. We've got a Patreon as well that I do nothing with, but appreciate that. Go follow Mike on Substack. Is it just Mike Madrid on Substack?
Mike Madrid.
Just go follow Mike Madrid on Substack. Very interesting perspectives that we really need in today's polarized politics. Very much, I think, if you've gotten anything from this, is an even keel and kind of an anchoring perspective on where politics can and should be, and how we can work together for common goals. So, again, I really, really appreciate it, and thank you everybody for tuning in. We will see you next week.